No, the word hung in the air between us, simple yet definitive. Victoria Hunt stared at me from across my desk, her once perfect makeup now slightly smudged, her designer suit wrinkled from a day of crisis meetings. A year ago, she'd fired me without a second thought. Now she was practically begging for a lifeline. "Catherine, please reconsider," she said, leaning forward. "Wingate is facing a potential sale. We've lost 40% of our revenue since your departure." I studied her, this woman who had once looked at me as just another expense to be trimmed after the merger. In her eyes, I could see something I never thought I'd witness: desperation. "Our companies have fundamentally different approaches to business," I replied calmly, running my finger along the edge of the framed photo on my desk. My daughter Lily's college graduation, which I'd actually attended instead of sending apologetic texts from a client meeting. "I wish you all the best, Victoria." Truly. As she left, shoulders slumped, I felt no triumph, just quiet confirmation that I'd made the right choice. The revenge I had imagined wasn't in watching her company struggle, but in building something valuable on my own terms. My name is Catherine Morrison, and this is how I found my second act. The dismissal, 1 year earlier. "Your salary doesn't align with our new compensation structure," Victoria Hunt said flatly, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically on the polished conference table. Two security guards hovered by the door, making the implication clear. "This is effective immediately." I took in her expensive silk blouse, the carefully rehearsed expression of corporate regret on her face. Behind those practiced eyes, I saw what she really thought. I was just another line item to be trimmed in their post-merger efficiency sweep. "I understand," I replied, smiling calmly. "I wish you all the best." My calm exterior betrayed nothing of the storm brewing inside me. 10 years of my life given to Wingate and Associates. 10 years of early mornings and late nights, canceled vacations and missed family gatherings. 10 years of building the enterprise accounts division from nothing, cultivating relationships that now generated 40% of the company's annual revenue. And it was over in less than 15 minutes. Flashback: my father's business. As I packed my personal items under the stunned gaze of my team, my mind flashed back to when I was 12. My father owned a small manufacturing company in Ohio that had been bought by a corporate giant. "They don't care about people, Caddy," he told me the night after he was let go, his calloused hands trembling slightly as he nursed a rare glass of whiskey. "They only see numbers on a spreadsheet." I'd promised myself then that I'd never be just a number on someone's spreadsheet. Yet here I was, 38 years later, experiencing the same cold corporate calculus. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morrison," whispered Samantha, my assistant, tears streaming down her face. She'd been with me for 4 years, a single mother working on her business degree at night school. I'd mentored her, rearranged her schedule for her daughter's school events, seen her grow into a confident professional. "It's going to be okay," I told her, hugging her tightly. "Change is part of business. But relationships endure." I hugged each team member, thanking them for their hard work, whispering encouragements. Then I walked out of the building, head held high, past the security guard who'd been assigned to escort me out. David Jackson, who'd worked there for 12 years and whose daughter I'd helped get into college last year, looked apologetic. "This doesn't feel right, Mrs. Morrison." "It's okay, David. These things happen." But as the glass doors closed behind me and I stepped into the crisp autumn air, I allowed myself to feel, just for a moment, the weight of what had happened. I had given everything to this company. I had delayed starting a family until my late 30s, missed my father's 70th birthday celebration, worked through pneumonia to close our biggest account. All because I believed in what we were building. Home, the weight of reality. I pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in silence for a long moment. Through the window, I could see Robert moving around our kitchen, probably preparing dinner. My husband of 25 years, the history professor who'd supported every step of my career, who'd never once complained about the late nights or canceled plans. The first tear slipped down my cheek, then another. In the privacy of my car, I finally allowed myself to cry, not just for the job, but for all the moments I'd sacrificed. My father's birthday, the school plays I'd missed, the weekends I could have spent with Lily before she left for college. And for what? to be discarded when it was convenient for the company's bottom line? I wiped away my tears and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My father's voice echoed in my head. Never let them see you bleed, Caddy. Robert looked up as I entered, his warm eyes instantly registering that something was wrong. He set down the wooden spoon he was holding and crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides. What happened? He asked, his hands gentle on my shoulders. I was let go, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Effective immediately. For a moment, he said nothing, just pulled me into his arms. I breathed in his familiar scent, old books and the sandalwood cologne I'd given him for Christmas, and felt my shoulders finally relax. Their loss, he said simply. I pulled back to look at him. This man who believed in me when I barely believed in myself. We'd met in college, the serious business major and the passionate history student who challenged each other's worldviews over late-night coffees and early morning debates. You're taking this remarkably well, he observed, sliding a glass of wine toward me as I settled at our kitchen island. What good would falling apart do? I replied, though the truth was more complicated. I had suspected this might happen from the moment the merger with our Denix Group was announced 3 months ago. Their corporate culture was notoriously cutthroat, and rumors of their strip and sell tactics had circulated in the industry for years. So, what's your plan? Robert asked, knowing me too well to believe I didn't have one. I took a sip of wine and thought about the non-compete clause in my contract. It was stringent but not impossible to navigate. And more importantly, I knew exactly which clients would follow me once it expired. For now, I'm going to take a much-needed break, I said, smiling slightly. Maybe we'll finally take that trip to Portugal we've been talking about. I smiled, but my mind was already racing with possibilities. The client's response. The first call came while I was still unpacking my box of office belongings. It was Joseph Bradley, CEO of Bradley Logistics, one of our largest clients. Catherine, what the hell is going on? I just heard you're out. It's true, Joseph. The new management decided to go in a different direction. Different direction? You've been our point person for 7 years. You guided us through that nightmare with the Asia-Pacific expansion. My board trusts you. I could hear the genuine concern in his voice, and it touched me. Joseph and I had developed a rapport that went beyond the typical client-vendor relationship. When his wife Elizabeth was diagnosed with breast cancer last year, I connected them with a specialist who ultimately saved her life. How is Elizabeth doing? I asked, deliberately changing the subject. There was a pause, then a softer tone. She's doing well. The doctor you connected us with. Catherine, we owe you so much. She might not be here if. His voice cracked slightly, and I closed my eyes, remembering the late-night call when he'd first told me about the diagnosis, the fear in his voice, the way I dropped everything to help them find the right specialist. I'm glad she's doing well, I said simply. This isn't right, Joseph said, his businessman's voice returning. I'm calling Victoria Hunt myself. Similar conversations followed throughout the day. Each client expressed shock, confusion, and in some cases, outright anger. I was careful not to criticize Wingate or our dentics. There was no need. The situation spoke for itself. That evening, as Robert and I sat at dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. Dad told me what happened. Those idiots don't deserve you, Mom. Call me tomorrow? Love you. I smiled, showing the message to Robert. Lily and I had our struggles, particularly during her teenage years when my work schedule had meant missing too many of her important moments. But we'd been rebuilding our relationship since she'd started college. She's right, Robert said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. They don't deserve you. For the first time that day, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, I said. I've missed so much, focusing on work. Like what? Robert asked, his historian's curiosity evident. Like being present. Really present, I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. With you. With Lily. With my father, before his memory started to go. Robert nodded thoughtfully. It's not too late to change that, he said. The unexpected visitor. 3 days after my termination, I received an unexpected visitor. Walter Kingsley himself, the 78-year-old founder of Kingsley Partners, was standing on my front porch, leaning slightly on his cane. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said when I opened the door. But some conversations shouldn't happen over the phone. I invited him in and made tea, watching as he settled into my living room sofa. Walter had been my first major client when I joined Wingate and Associates. He had taken a chance on me when I was still proving myself, and that trust had evolved into a friendship that transcended business. "I spoke with Victoria Hunt this morning," he said, his weathered hands wrapped around the teacup. "She fed me some nonsense about restructuring and compensation packages." "That seems to be the official line," I replied. "Catherine, I've been in business for over 50 years. I know when someone's trying to sell me a load of garbage." He set down his cup firmly. "Kingsley Partners has been with Wingate because of you. When my grandson had that problem with substance abuse, you found him the treatment program that turned his life around. When we needed to pivot during the pandemic, you were there with solutions while everyone else was panicking." I remembered those late night calls with Walter, his voice cracking as he told me about finding his grandson unconscious from an overdose. I remembered researching treatment centers, calling in personal favors to get the boy admitted to the best program on short notice. Walter reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is a letter formally notifying Wingate that we're reviewing our contract. I wanted you to know before they did. Walter, I appreciate your loyalty, but I don't want you to make business decisions based on personal feelings." He smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "This is a business decision. Without you there, the quality of service will decline. It's that simple." After Walter left, I sat with the knowledge that the first domino had fallen, not because I had pushed it, but because relationships built on genuine care and trust have their own momentum. The legal warning. A week after my termination, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Catherine Morrison speaking." "Catherine, this is Diana Reynolds from Ardentix Legal." Her voice was clipped, professional. "We've noticed some unusual activity with our key accounts and wanted to touch base." I moved to my home office window, gazing out at the maple tree in our front yard, its leaves turning brilliant shades of orange and red. Not unlike the way my own life was transforming, I thought wryly. "I'm not sure how I can help with that, Diana. I no longer work for the company." "Yes, but we believe you may be contacting our clients and potentially violating the terms of your non-compete agreement." I had anticipated this call. Victoria was feeling the pressure and looking for someone to blame. As I watched a leaf detach from the maple and drift slowly to the ground, I thought of my father again. How after losing his business, he'd rebuilt his life, focusing on what truly mattered: family, integrity, relationships built on trust. "I haven't solicited any business or contacted any clients with the intention of taking their business," I replied truthfully. "If clients have reached out to me personally, that's their prerogative. We have reason to believe you're actively undermining the company." "That's simply not true, Diana. I've been nothing but professional, but I can't control how clients react to my departure." After a tense back and forth, Diana ended with a thinly veiled threat about legal consequences if I violated my agreement. I hung up, unfazed. Later that day, Robert came home early from his job as a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. "I bumped into Benjamin right at the coffee shop," he said, mentioning a mutual friend who worked on Wingate's board. "He says all hell is breaking loose. Apparently, 4 major clients have formally requested meetings with the board to discuss your termination." "Really?" This was faster than I'd expected. Benjamin said Victoria's been trying to handle it herself, but the clients are insisting on board involvement. They're questioning her judgment. I allowed myself a small smile. "That's interesting." He also mentioned they had an emergency financial meeting. They're projecting significant losses if these clients leave. Over dinner, we discussed what this might mean. Robert studied me with a knowing look. "You're planning something, aren't you?" I twirled spaghetti around my fork. "Let's just say I'm considering my options." The truth was, I had spent the day researching what it would take to start my own consulting firm. My non-compete prevented me from directly soliciting Wingate's clients for a year, but it didn't prevent me from establishing my own business. And if clients happened to follow me once they were no longer contractually bound to Wingate, well, that would be their decision. The secret dinner, Rebecca Olson chose a quiet, upscale restaurant on the outskirts of Richmond for our dinner. She was already seated when I arrived, her expression brightening as I approached the table. "Catherine, thank you for coming," she said, standing to embrace me briefly. "I've missed our conversations." "It's only been 2 weeks, Rebecca," I laughed. 2 weeks too long. She gestured for me to sit. "I hope you don't mind, but I've invited a few colleagues to join us." Before I could respond, I spotted Joseph Bradley and Walter Kingsley being led to our table. Behind them was Michael Donovan, CEO of Donovan Innovations, another of my former key clients. "What's going on?" I asked as they took their seats. "We're staging an intervention," Joseph said with a grin that didn't quite mask his seriousness, "for Wingate and Associates." Over appetizers, they revealed that each of them had met with Victoria Hunt and left unimpressed. The board had reached out to some of them directly, trying to smooth things over, but the damage was done. "She tried to tell me that your departure wouldn't affect our service level," Michael said, shaking his head. "Then couldn't answer basic questions about our upcoming product launch. Information you've had for months." I remembered helping Michael navigate the challenges of modernizing his family's traditional business, how we'd stayed up all night once preparing for a crucial presentation to his board, how he'd called me first when his daughter got accepted to medical school, before he'd even told his wife. "The bigger issue," Rebecca added, "is trust. How can we trust a company that discards someone like you so carelessly? It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of why we do business with them." I listened, touched by their loyalty, but cautious. "I appreciate the support, but I don't want to be the reason your companies make decisions that might not be in your best interests." Walter tapped his water glass with a spoon. "That's precisely why we're here, Catherine. This is about our interests." They had a proposition. They knew about my non-compete agreement, but they also knew it would eventually expire. In the meantime, they wanted to know if I was planning to start my own firm. "We've discussed this among ourselves," Joseph explained. "We're prepared to wait out your non-compete period. When it expires, if you have your own consultancy, we want to be your first clients." "We're not asking you to violate any agreements," Rebecca clarified. "We're just telling you that we'll be reviewing our options when our contracts with Wingate come up for renewal." I was stunned by their coordinated approach. "What about your current projects?" "We'll fulfill our contractual obligations," Walter said, "but we won't be expanding our services with them." And when the time comes, the implication was clear. They were offering me a lifeline, a guaranteed client base once I could legally work with them again. "This is overwhelming," I admitted, in the best possible way. As dinner progressed, we carefully avoided discussing specific plans or making concrete arrangements that might violate my agreement. Instead, we talked about industry trends, their business challenges, and my perspectives on strategic growth. I looked around the table at these people who had been clients on paper, but had become so much more. Joseph, who'd fought back tears when telling me his wife's cancer was in remission. Rebecca, who'd built her company while raising 2 children alone after her husband's sudden death. Walter, who'd mentored me when I was starting out, who still called me on my birthday every year. Michael, who turned to me for advice when his marriage was struggling. This wasn't just business. These were real relationships, built on years of trust and mutual respect. When I walked through the door at home, Robert took one look at my face and knew. "Good dinner?" "Life-changing," I replied. The offer, the following week, brought a surprising development. I received an email from Charles Hamilton, chairman of the board at Wingate and Associates, requesting a meeting. I agreed, suggesting we meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near the river. When I arrived, Charles was already there, looking considerably more haggard than when I'd last seen him at the company holiday party 6 months earlier. "Thank you for coming, Catherine," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I appreciate your willingness to talk." "Of course, Charles. What can I do for you?" He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "I'll be direct. The board is concerned about the client response to your departure. We've received formal letters from 6 major accounts expressing their disappointment and indicating they're reviewing their contracts." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I understand that must be challenging. It's more than challenging. It's potentially catastrophic. He leaned forward. Catherine, the board feels your termination may have been hasty. We'd like to discuss your return to the company. I had suspected this might happen, but hearing it still sent a jolt through me. In what capacity? We're prepared to offer you a promotion. Senior Vice President of Client Relations, reporting directly to the board. A significant increase in compensation, of course. And Victoria. She would remain CO, but your division would operate with considerable autonomy. I took a sip of my coffee, considering his offer. It was tempting, a vindication of sorts, but something felt wrong about it. What happens to my team? The people who are currently trying to manage my client relationships? Charles hesitated. There would be some reorganization, naturally. Translation. Those people would be pushed aside to make room for me. The same callous approach that had been used with me would be applied to them. People like Samantha, who had texted me just yesterday about her daughter's school play. I appreciate the offer, Charles, but I need to consider it carefully. He looked relieved, clearly having expected an immediate rejection. Of course. Take the weekend to think about it. Flashback, my father's last days. That evening, as I sat in my home office contemplating Charles' offer, my phone rang. It was the nursing home where my father lived. His dementia had worsened. They thought I should come soon. As I drove the 3 hours to Ohio, memories flooded back. My father teaching me to ride a bike. His calloused hands gently bandaging my skinned knee. The pride in his eyes when I graduated college, the first in our family to do so. And the regret I felt when his memory started to slip. And I realized how many moments I'd missed because I was always working, always putting the job first. When I arrived, he was having one of his better days. He recognized me immediately, his face lighting up. Caddy, he said, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. You didn't need to drive all this way. Of course I did, I said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. You're my dad. We talked for hours, or rather, he talked and I listened. He told me stories I'd heard 100 times before, about his own father, about starting his business, about meeting my mother. I listened as though hearing them for the first time, knowing these moments were precious and fleeting. As evening fell and he grew tired, he suddenly fixed me with a surprisingly lucid gaze. Are you happy, Caddy? He asked. The question caught me off guard. I think I could be, I answered honestly. He nodded slowly. That's what matters. Not the money or the title. Just be happy. When I returned home late that night, Robert was waiting up for me. I told him about my visit with my father and about Charles' offer. What are you going to do? He asked, holding me close. I think. I'm going to build something new, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. Something that reflects what I really value. I picked up my phone and dialed Charles' number. I've made my decision, I told him when he answered. I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. Catherine, please reconsider. My decision is final, Charles, but I wish you and the company all the best. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that ultimately set us free. Let's take that trip to Portugal, I said to Robert. Before I get too busy building my new company. The new beginning. 6 months passed quickly. I spent the time meticulously building the foundation for Morrison's strategic partners. I secured office space in a renovated historic building downtown, developed a comprehensive service model, and hired a small but talented team, including Samantha and 2 other former colleagues who had left Wingate and Associates. I was careful to adhere strictly to my non-compete agreement, focusing on developing relationships with businesses outside of Wingate's client base. Word spread quickly in Richmond's business community, and I found myself fielding inquiries from companies I'd never worked with before. During this time, I also made changes in my personal life. Robert and I took that trip to Portugal, 2 glorious weeks of exploration and reconnection. I visited my father more regularly, savoring the good days and providing comfort on the bad ones. Lily came home for spring break, and instead of checking emails or taking calls, I was fully present for our mother-daughter shopping trips and late-night conversations. Meanwhile, the situation at Wingate and Associates continued to deteriorate. Through the grapevine, I heard that Bradley Logistics had reduced their contract by 60%. Kingsley Partners had shifted all new projects to other firms. Olson Manufacturing had not renewed their contract at all. The morning my non-compete officially expired, I woke up feeling oddly calm. This was the day I had been working toward, but there was no need to make dramatic moves. The groundwork had already been laid. I arrived at the office early and had just settled at my desk when my phone rang. "Is today the day?" Joseph Bradley asked without preamble. I smiled. "It is." "Excellent. I'm sending over the contract we discussed. We've been holding this project specifically for you." By noon, I had received similar calls from Rebecca, Walter, and Michael. By the end of the week, Morrison Strategic Partners had signed contracts with 5 former Wingate clients, representing nearly $2 million in annual revenue. I hadn't poached a single client. I hadn't needed to. They had come to me of their own accord, precisely as we had discussed that night at dinner 6 months earlier. The most satisfying moment came when Samantha forwarded an email that had been sent to my new company address. It was from Victoria Hunt, requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. I politely declined. 1 year after my termination, Morrison Strategic Partners had grown to a team of 15, serving 22 clients across various industries. We had moved to larger offices and were developing a reputation for excellence and integrity. Most importantly, we were building a company culture that valued people over profits, relationships over transactions. I made sure every team member had flexibility for family obligations. I implemented a mentorship program for promising young professionals. I personally remembered birthdays, sent handwritten notes, and never asked anyone to sacrifice their personal lives for the company's bottom line. I was reviewing quarterly projections when Samantha knocked on my office door. "You have a visitor," she said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Victoria Hunt." And so we returned to where this story began. Victoria Hunt in my office, asking for a merger to save her struggling company. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," I told her after hearing her proposal. "Our companies have fundamentally different approaches to business and client relationships." "Catherine, please." "I wish you all the best, Victoria. Truly. But my answer is no." As she left, I felt no triumph or vindication, just a quiet confirmation that I had made the right choice in creating something new rather than trying to fix what was broken. The revenge I had imagined wasn't in watching Wingate and Associates struggle, but in the success I had built from the ground up. I had proven my value, not through confrontation, but through consistency and care. Epilogue. A balanced life. That evening, I left the office at 5:30, something I made a point of doing whenever possible these days. Robert and I had tickets to Lily's graduate school art exhibition in Boston, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. As we drove to the airport, I thought about how much had changed in a year. Not just professionally, but personally. I was more present with my family. I had found a way to be successful without sacrificing everything else. I had built something I could be truly proud of. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Robert asked, glancing away from the road for a moment to smile at me. "I was just thinking about something my father used to say," I replied. "Success isn't what you have, it's what you leave behind." "And what do you think you're leaving behind?" I considered this for a moment. "A business built on genuine relationships. A model that values people as people, not just resources. And hopefully." I reached over to squeeze his hand. "A daughter who knows she's more important than any job." As our plane took off into the sunset, I realized I had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't fighting back, it's moving forward. And in that forward motion, I had found not just success, but fulfillment.